Hi guys, I am going to do a mini lesson in writing today. Before we left school, we were working on procedural writing, and we talked about how procedural writing is just a fancy way to say how-to writing. And we read lots and lots of examples of procedural writing at school, and I'm going to put a list of them in the Bloom's link when I add this. But I wanted to share with you my class's favorite procedural writing story called Wombat Stew. Now, we read this a couple times in the classroom, but I wanted to make sure that we all got to listen to it because I think only my class read this one. So this story is called Wombat Stew. You can see it's an older book. I am going to go over a couple vocabulary words before we start. This story is set in Australia, so they use some words that we're not used to here. One of the words is wombat. A wombat is native to Australia, meaning that's where they live in the wild. And they kind of look like a small, chubby little bear. Another word that is going to show up in this story early on is the word billabong. A billabong is a lake or a pond. And then another one of our characters besides the wombat is a dingo. And a dingo is a wild dog that lives in Australia. There's going to be lots of other words in here that you might not know. Go ahead and write them down and you guys can look them up later. Wombat Stew. This story is by Marcia K. Vaughn and illustrated by Pamela Lofts. Wombat Stew. One day, on the banks of a billabong, a very clever dingo caught a wombat and decided to make wombat stew, gooey brewy, yummy chewy, wombat stew. Platypus came ambling by the bank. "Good day, Dingo," he said, snapping his bill. "What is all that water for?" "I'm brewing up a gooey, chewy stew for that fat wombat," replied the Dingo with a toothy grin. "If you ask me," said the platypus, "best thing for a gooey stew is mud. Big blops of billabong mud." "Blops of mud?" Dingo laughed. "What a good idea! Righto, in they go." So Platypus scooped up big blops of mud with his tail and he tipped them into the billy can. Around the bubbling billy, Dingo danced and sang, "Wombat stew, gooey brewy, yummy chewy, wombat stew." Waltzing out of the shade of the iron banks came an emu. She arched her graceful neck over the brew. "Oh, Dingo," she fluttered, "what have we here?" "Gooey, chewy wombat stew," boasted the Dingo. "If only there were a bit more chewy," she sighed. But don't worry, a few feathers will set it right." "Feathers?" Dingo smiled. "That would be chewy. Righto, in they go." So into the gooey brew, Emu dropped her finest feathers. Around and around the bubbling billy, Dingo danced and sang, "Wombat stew, crunchy munchy for my lunchy, wombat stew." Old Blue-Tongue the lizard came sliding off his sun-soaked stone. "Silly Dingo," he hissed. "There are no flies in this stew. Can't be wombat stew without crunchy flies in it." And he stuck out his bright blue tongue. There's a lot to be said for flies," agreed Dingo, rubbing his paws together. "Righto, in they go." So Lizard snapped 100 flies from the air with his long tongue and flipped them into the gooey, chewy stew. Around and around and around the bubbling billy, Dingo danced and sang, Wombat stew, wombat stew, crunchy munchy for my lunchy, wombat stew. Up through the red dust pops Unchinda. Wait a bit, not so fast, he bristled, shaking the red dust from his quills. Now I've been listening to all this advice, and take it from me, for a crunchy, munchy stew you need slugs and bugs and creepy crawlies. Dingo wagged his tail. Why, I should have thought of that. Righto, in they go. So Unchinda dug up all sorts of creepy crawlies and dropped them into the gooey, chewy, crunchy stew. The very clever Dingo stirred and stirred, all the while singing, Wombat stew, hot and spicy, oh so nicey, wombat stew. Just then, the sleepy-eyed koala climbed down the scribbly gum tree. Look here, he yawned. Any bush cook knows you can't make a spicy stew without gum nuts. Leave it to the koala to think of gum nuts, Dingo laughed, and he licked his whiskers. Righto, in they go. And into the gooey, chewy, crunchy, munchy stew, koala shook lots and lots of gum nuts. Aha! Cried Dingo. Now my stew is only missing one thing. What's that? Asked the animals. That fat wombat. Wait, stop! Hang on, Dingo. You can't put that wombat into the stew yet. Why not? Asked the Dingo. You haven't tasted it. Oh, righto, I'll taste it. And that very clever Dingo bent over the billy and took a great big slurp of stew. Ow! I'm poisoned, he howled. You've all tricked me. And he dashed away deep into the bush, never again to sing. Wombat stew, gooey brewy, yummy chewy, wombat stew. And that was our story. So I hope you guys enjoyed that one too. I know my class really, really likes that one. What I'd like to encourage you guys to do next is to write your own procedural writing story. And remember, that's just a how-to story. In this one, we learned how to make a wombat stew, but in some of the others, we read Pizza, where we learned how to make a pizza. We also read how to read a story, and that one was a really good one too. Now in this one, they did not use the words step 1, step 2, step 3. They just listed the different things and introduced a new character as they were adding a new ingredient, which was very clever of this author. Some of our stories we have read where they do list our steps with the numbers, but don't forget we can also use our words. So we could say first, secondly, thirdly, we could say next, then, finally, all those different things. On my next screen, I'm going to show you what the kids are used to writing on. So if you could show them this should look familiar to them. This is the writing paper that we've been using in the classroom. I'd like you guys to write your own stories if you'd like, and if you would take a picture of them and post them on Blooms, I'd love to see them, okay? Hope you guys liked our story. Bye!